Check this out. We have two houses for sale right next to each other in a row. This first one they purchased back in 2021 for $1.4 million. They listed it for sale back in April of 2023 for $3.65 million. And then they also listed it for rent for $20,000 a month. And then they decided to take it off the market and raise the price earlier this year. Now they're at $3.99 million, okay? So this house has been on the market for sale for a year and a half, and the price is even higher than it was before, also for rent, still sitting empty. The house right next door, purchased in 2022 for $2.475 million. Then they listed it for sale back in September this year for $2.795 million. Haven't actually lowered the price, and now it's listed for rent. So now they're looking at getting $14,000 a month in rent for this house. Like, tell me out there if anybody's gonna pay these prices, guys. And you wanna see something even crazier? That even though $14,000 a month in rent is a lot of money, it actually would still cost you more to buy this house at the price they're asking right now. At $2.495 million, this house would still cost you about $15,300 a month. That's with a 20% down payment. And don't forget, 20% of this is about 250 grand. And these houses perfectly illustrate the point of today's video, which is that owning a home is so much more expensive than renting now that it pretty much doesn't make sense for hardly anyone. Even very wealthy folks right now are dumping a lot of their real estate because the carrying costs on these homes have gotten so insane where it just doesn't make any sense. And even if you are rich and you can afford those carrying costs, there's probably a lot of other things you can do with all that money that's being thrown away each month with the house just sitting empty. Like, this is my vacation house. I only use 2-3 months a year, and it's costing me $1 million a year in property taxes and insurance and upkeep. But here's the thing. Traditionally speaking, before the pandemic especially, there was a lot of places where you could own a home for cheaper than it would cost you to rent, okay? Probably a good half of the country fell under that category. Well, that is no longer the case. But on average, owning a home was always more expensive. In fact, the average is about 14% more expensive to own a home than to rent, and that was before the cost of housing got out of control. That's a brand new house. That used to be an empty lot right there last time I was here, so this entire thing went up in the past 5 months. But now, fast forward to today in 2024, it's estimated that the premium for being a homeowner is now that it's about 35% more expensive than renting. And that's pretty much at a historical high, and it's likely to continue that way indefinitely, especially at these prices. But even if prices came down, you know what the problem is that the cost to own a home has just gotten too high with inflation, guys. Because even if home prices fell and dropped in half, you know what's not going to drop in half is going to be insurance. You're not going to have repair costs drop in half. You know, if you need to get a new air conditioning system, a new HVAC system, maybe you need to get a new roof, you're not going to see labor costs or material costs drop in half. So the cost to maintain and operate that home will still be high. The only thing that would help people then is because if you're able to get the house for half off, then it will offset what you're paying monthly, so you can dedicate more funds to paying for these other expenses. So technically that would make owning a house more affordable, but it wouldn't make maintaining a household more affordable. So the way things sit right now, if we wanted owning a home to be on par with renting and have it be roughly the same cost, we would need to see mortgage rates in the low 3% right now, basically where it was when we had this whole frenzy going on. And we know we're not getting anywhere near close to that anytime soon because of what's happening with the 10-year Treasury market right now. That's why we're seeing mortgage rates persist and stay well over 7% now. This reminds me of one comment I saw recently that said something along the lines of, well, I'm definitely convinced that owning a home is scary, but what's even scarier to me is being a lifelong renter. Well, I kind of laugh when I see stuff like that because it's just a funny joke. But at the same time, I don't understand why it's so scary to be a renter. Renting was always demonized because you're paying off someone else's mortgage. At the end of the day, you have nothing to show for it. After 30, 40, 50, 60 years of paying your rent, you have no asset at the end. You have no house that you own. But we know, based on how things are now, you don't ever really own your home. If you stop paying the property taxes, it will be taken from you. If you have any type of loan against the house, you have to have insurance. You stop paying that, they'll implement insurance for you. It used to be that when you bought a house, you could relatively stabilize your housing costs, and that was one of the main reasons to buy a house instead of rent, because rent always goes up and your 30-year mortgage remains the same. But all the other expenses surrounding that 30-year mortgage no longer remain the same. They're extremely volatile now, like homeowners insurance, like the cost of repairs, like property taxes. These things are not stable expenses anymore. But you know what should be even more terrifying is not being able to afford a place to live. Not being a renter for life. You should be more terrified of the fact that you might not be able to afford the house that you have paid off anymore. I think that's a much more terrifying prospect than, being 80 years old paying rent somewhere, but it's easy to pay. And honestly, guys, I really see the benefit of both. I've been an owner, I've been a renter. This summer I was both. I've owned my home here in Miami and I was renting a place in California. So I definitely see the pros and cons of both sides. I could make an entire video on the pros and cons of renting versus buying, but I think most of you probably wouldn't watch it, so I'm not going to. But one thing I've talked about before, which is still true, is that nationwide, it's pretty good to be a renter right now, not only because it's cheaper to be an owner, but there's been so many new buildings come online over the past year and a half, and there's still more being built. There's a lot of brand new apartment buildings, which is creating more inventory, which puts downward pressure on rents. Here's a perfect example from somebody facing this prospect right now. This woman that lives in Colorado, she's paying $2,500 a month for rent and utilities, okay, for a 2-bedroom home. And she just bought a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, which obviously is bigger, for $525,000. And now her mortgage payment will be $3,500 a month. But here's the thing, that's just the mortgage payment. We're not talking about property taxes. We're not talking about insurance. We're not talking about any upkeep in the house. We're not talking about any other expenses that may arise as a homeowner. So not only are you paying about 30% more right off the bat, but you're also subject to any surprise expenses that may come up. So you really need to have a fat wallet in order to take on this type of responsibility. So this woman says, I don't mind renting, but I'm at the point where I want to buy and move forward. It was just a matter of determining what I was comfortable with and what I knew I could afford. And she feels like she got a good deal, and the home that she bought was on the market for several months and also saw some price reductions. So she locked in a mortgage just under 6% right before the rates started rising again. And she's looking forward to having more space and a large yard for her dog. The problem is you hear these stories, right? And they only talk about the good side of homeownership. And I've shared many of the negatives with you guys that I've experienced here with the condo that I bought. And obviously there's been a lot of good things about it, but there's also been bad things too. But unfortunately, all of these stories only want to talk about the good side of being a homeowner. Oh, I have more space for my dog. Well, never talked about the extra money. You never talk about if you're prepared for a large emergency expense. Nothing like that. Check this out. A couple of years ago when I first walked past here, this was an empty lot. Pretty much just sitting here abandoned. Nothing happened. Now they have a brand new house on here that's not even completed yet, and it's already for sale. This is kind of like the game plan that they do here. They build these spec houses and hope that they can just get the money for it, guys. They listed it for sale actually a year ago before the house was even built. Think about that. For $8 million, and now they're down to $7.5 million as of September, now that the house is probably 70% completed and still no takers. All of these houses that they build like this in Miami, they hit the market for sale before they're ever even completed, in hopes that they're just gonna find somebody dumb enough to spend this kind of money on this house. Today, more than ever, people need to be doing what they need to do in order to protect their online privacy, and that's why today's video is sponsored by Delete Me. Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that will remove your personal information that's being sold online, and Delete Me's privacy experts remove you from hundreds of data brokers all year long. In fact, take a look at my most recent report here. You can see Delete Me will give you quarterly reports on how many listings have been removed and how many have been reviewed, and they have literally reviewed thousands and thousands of listings on my behalf, just over the past quarter have removed my own personal data from over 115 data brokers that would otherwise have my information online. And in fact, one of my favorite features about Delete Me is the custom removal request feature, because if you see that your data is on a website that Delete Me somehow missed, then you can go to Delete Me and actually request them to remove your data from that website in particular, and Delete Me will work on your behalf to get your information secured. So make sure you get 20% off your Delete Me subscription by joining today using the link down in the description below. Join deleteme.com/boardinarrow or use the QR code on the screen. But here's the thing, with these home prices being where they're at and rents being pretty much stabilized and even coming down in many areas. I know here in Miami, the rents are coming down. You know, if you're somebody looking at moving soon and you're trying to decide whether or not you want to become a homeowner or move to a rental, or maybe you want to transition from being a homeowner to a renter, and you're looking just at the monthly cost, it's kind of a no-brainer right now to transition into being a renter. In fact, according to a Fannie Mae survey that was just completed in October, a record high of 36% of consumers say their next move will be to rent rather than to buy. And they say the rental preference has been growing in recent years. 3 years ago it was at 26%. So that's a 10% improvement of people looking to be a renter right now versus an owner, guys. And some of it's by choice, some of it's because they have no choice. They talked to another woman, only 28 years old. She bought a 3-bed, 2-bath fixer-upper in Georgia in 2021, and she said it felt like a really sweet deal, but we were spending thousands of dollars almost every month on home improvement supplies. We lived at Home Depot. She was also growing tired of making the 30 to 40 minute drive from the suburbs to Atlanta. So over the summer, she moved into a loft in the city and decided to rent out the home in order to cover their mortgage payment. I'm sure she'll quickly find out that being a landlord comes with its own set of challenges as well. Sometimes you have properties that give you no trouble, and other times you have properties that are nothing but trouble, and you just don't know until you go through the motions. You know, take for example, in California, guys, like pretty much everywhere there, it is significantly cheaper to be a renter than it is to be a homeowner. Like pretty much it would cost half in most cases to be a renter than to own. And if you're just looking at that from a pure monthly budget perspective, even if you have the money to buy, there's a lot of extra things you could do with that extra money. You can invest it and retire early. You could buy a rental house yourself and become a landlord. You could use the money and take nice vacations every year, or have the money to start a family. There's endless possibilities of what you could do with the extra money is the point. But I fully understand as a homeowner myself that there are also other things to take into account that can be just as important, if not more important, than the money. Me, for example, I just love the freedom. I like knowing that I'm not going to be kicked out unless I decide to leave, okay? Because that was always a problem I had with my last landlord, is constantly having the threat every single year the lease was up for renewal, oh, we're not going to renew it, and then they change their mind, they're going to renew it. It was just that constant stress of starting to look for a place, and then they change their mind and you can stay, and then all that time and effort is wasted, but also the mental agony of knowing that, okay, in 2 months I'm gonna have to move, and starting to mentally prepare yourself, and then it doesn't happen, you know? Now I can leave for the summer and I don't have to worry about when I come back, am I gonna have to renew my lease or am I gonna have a place to live? I have my place indefinitely. To me, that is the most valuable thing about being a homeowner, actually. Not the appreciation, not the cost, although the cost is a second one for me. That even though my condo is having assessments and it's expensive, it's still cheaper than if I had to rent a similar place, okay? Because I have a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, oceanfront condo, guys. The rent on something like that around here is usually at least $6,000 or $7,000 a month or more at minimum. I'm paying $5,100 as an owner, and which is up substantially from when I first bought the place, which also proves my earlier point that these expenses are not stabilized. Sure, it's more expensive and has gotten a lot more expensive than usual because it's a condo, but traditional homeowners that buy a house face the same problem. I'd have to go back and look at it, but when my wife and I used to own this duplex in West Palm Beach, our expenses rose significantly over the couple of years we owned that place as well. You know, they started off low, the cap rate was good, but then the expenses started piling up, and most of the expenses were in the form of repairs, things that needed to be taken care of that just weren't addressed before. The house was old, both duplexes were fully occupied, and were getting the wear and tear that you would expect, and things break. Now Fannie Mae, they just updated their forecast of what's going to happen with mortgage rates going into 2025, because don't forget guys, they said before that by the end of this year, we were going to see mortgage rates back down to 5.5 or 5.25%. That was their previous prediction, okay? But now, all of that is changing. Fannie Mae just slashed its existing home sales forecast to a gain of only 4% next year from their previous 11% prediction. And obviously these predictions don't mean jack because clearly they're never really right, but it's interesting to talk about. They also said that they no longer expect mortgage rates to sink below 6% next year, and its outlook for the fourth quarter is going to be an average of 6.6%. Just in October, they said they were looking at maybe 6.5%. So they're actually increasing their mortgage rate forecast of where we're going to be in an entire year from now, guys. Think about it. Interest rates for a mortgage right now are sitting at about 7.09% or so, basically 7.1%. And so having it be 6.6% in a year from now is like zero improvement. Earlier in the year, they were saying that the fourth quarter for 2025, we're gonna see 6% mortgage rates. Now they're talking 6.6%. And get this, they're only expecting mortgage rates to go down to 6.1% by the last quarter of 2026. We're talking the next 2 years that mortgage rates are supposedly going to hover between 7 and 6%, guys, which means financing a house isn't going to get any more affordable than it is right now for the most part. The only thing that's going to make buying a house more affordable is if the price comes down substantially. The question is going to be whether or not homeowners are going to be able to wait that long, because life happens, people list homes for sale for all sorts of different reasons. But besides that, let's not forget that the ever-increasing cost of being a homeowner is going to continue to creep up between now and those next couple of years. And are people going to be able or willing to hang on to those higher costs is yet to be seen. Got another one for sale here. They listed back in April of 2024 for $3.95 million, and since have only cut the price $200,000. So this house is going on about 8 months sitting on the market. No one has purchased it yet, and I actually remember walking past this house earlier in the year, the first time I saw it for sale, and that's just the state of affairs with these listings around here. Property taxes on this house is only $6,000 a year, but the new owner is going to be paying over $40,000 a year. Like I said, who wants that, guys? Who wants to accept that responsibility? Almost nobody can, first of all, even if they wanted to, and most smart people are saying absolutely not. I'm going to keep paying my $3,000 a month in rent. I'm not going to be paying $22,000 a month to buy this stupid house. So I think the biggest indicator of what's going to happen in the housing market moving forward is just looking at what happens with inventory, guys. If we look at where inventory is right now, we're only about 20% away from being at pre-pandemic numbers nationally. So in a year from now, it'd be reasonable to say we're probably going to be back to pre-pandemic numbers of homes for sale on the market. But we know that buyers can't afford at these prices and these rates. And if people keep listing these houses at these prices and we still have these rates, which it looks like we're going to, are the buyers going to come back? The logical answer is probably not. So the only thing that can happen moving forward is if any of those sellers are serious about selling those homes, they're going to have to sell them for less. Fannie Mae is predicting the total amount of sales volume for real estate in 2025 to be $1.94 trillion. The previous prediction was at $2.14 trillion. And refinancings are predicted to be $527 billion versus the $600 billion they previously expected. So these predictions keep going down. The amount of sales they think are going to happen are going down. The interest rate projections are going up, which is why inventory is only the last leg to fall here. If we continue to see inventory to build, this is going to significantly change the landscape of the entire housing market, no doubt. They say that this year's total home sales will be at 4.71 million. Last year was at 4.77 million, so even worse than last year. Let's not forget about that. These are numbers we haven't seen since the early 90s either. But they're saying by 2026, they project that home sales will rebound to 5.68 million. So an additional million homes that are going to sell in 2026. You think so? With 6% interest rates or 6.5% rates still? I don't think so, unless prices come down. It's funny though, because they think even that home sales are going to go up in 2025 to 4.93 million. And obviously their predictions haven't been right, so I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight on that. But how are the home sales going to go up in 2025 from right now if the conditions that are causing us to have 30-year lows in home sales remain the same? That's what I would like to know. Nothing is going to fundamentally change between now and then. Home prices are still going to be high and interest rates are still going to be high. So what is going to bring out more buyers next year versus this year? Only lower home prices, if you ask me. And while all this is going on, you have Wall Street funds looking at buying single-family homes, okay? Evergreen Residential Holdings, they just raised $1 billion in capital to support its 3 business lines in investment into real estate. The funding, they say, came from an undisclosed number of investors. They say that residential asset investing, such as single-family rental, is fragmented and ready to be further industrialized. Like, huh? Why do we need that? Why do we need big corporations owning more single-family rentals? Now, if they produce more single-family rentals, because they're also looking at building to rent and using the money for that too, then I think that's probably a net positive for society, because people do need a place to live, and adding more inventory rather than taking away more inventory is always going to be a good thing. So let's just hope that a big company like Evergreen is going to use that $1 billion to build more houses rather than to buy up even more houses and turn them into rentals. Because I feel like that's the last thing we need right now, not only as people looking for a place to live, but also as a society. This is another example of what I mean here. Blackstone, they just made a deal to buy up Jersey Mike's, guys. Blackstone, they've been buying up pretty much everything, including real estate, and now they're buying Jersey Mike's, okay? So they're gonna spend $8 billion to buy this sandwich chain. So it's like all of these brands are now being absorbed by America's biggest investors. You have to sit and wonder, is this a good thing? Should the world's 10 richest corporations own all the real estate? Should they own all the restaurants and own every single thing that we use and buy? I mean, it just seems like kind of ridiculous. Subway was purchased by Rourke Capital for $9.6 billion, and Durden Restaurants, who already owns Olive Garden, they just bought Choi's, I've never even heard of this place, Chuys, for $605 million. Burger King even spent $1 billion to acquire its biggest Burger King franchisee this year. So what you're seeing is a lot of consolidation with these restaurants, with all types of businesses. And it's like, okay, on the one hand, if the quality of the product doesn't go down and the pricing doesn't get out of control, then maybe it's not such a bad thing, because at the end of the day, the consumer won't notice. But it's also crazy from the perspective that these are large corporations, guys. And if anything were ever to happen to Blackstone, for example, like say they have massive financial troubles, how many of those Jersey Mike's are going to go out of business? How many of those rental houses are going to have to get sold in order to help out with the bankruptcy or other kind of financial problem they might have? So, these companies have a lot of exposure to different sectors of the economy that can easily cause a pretty big recession, even if just one of these companies gets in trouble. But this is how things work in 2024. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.